We are the Captsone team that took on the HIPAA compliant network for Stark Dental, which was brought to us by Marshfield Clinic. My name is Luke Bednar, I'm the team lead.
Jan Matheson, server engineer.
I'm Crystal Evans, the wireless engineer.
And I'm Ben Fidel, the security engineer.
Special thanks to the Marshfield Clinic information systems team. We're surprised to see that Chris doesn't actually look like his LinkedIn picture. So we helped us with it whenever we ran into some troubles, and we had meetings every week, and it's been pretty good Capstone for sure. So we'll jump right into it.
Alright, so our problem statement is that Stark Dental is a mid-sized dental facility that serves 8,000 patients and has about 200 employees. They recently expanded to the Bear Island Dental Clinic, where they take on 2,000 more patients and about 75 more employees. Our challenge was to implement a HIPAA-compliant network, as well as upgrade network security, implement failover and two-factor authentication onto their network. So our presentation is laid out into 3 phases. The first phase, we have our device introduction as well as our topology, and we'll introduce you to HIPAA a little bit. Our second phase is going to be where our demonstrations are. We'll talk about our servers, our Palo Alto, and our NetScaler. And then the final phase is where we'll talk to you about our technical and personal lessons learned. So this is the beginning of phase 1, and I will now pass it off to Luke to talk about our devices.
Thank you. So we have a picture here depicting what our server rack looks like over in the Keels. The black boxes you see are the IBM servers that Marshfield Clinic gave to us, which we're running the ESXi on for all of our virtual servers and services. And we also have all of our networking equipment, which was Cisco routers and switches, as well as the NetScalers included in that box there. And then on the very top is our Palo Alto, which we'll talk about when we get to security. So here's the legend for the topology that we set up. We have the ESXi boxes on each site, and one at the DMZ. So showing a little bit here. All the services that are run on the ESXi box are the virtual servers. So our DMZ hosts web services that the NetScaler works with to load balance. That was Citrix NetScaler. And then we have the remote site for failover with the DMVPN connection between them, which is just connecting them so that failover can work seamlessly.
Alright, so to start this off, to go into HIPAA compliance, HIPAA is a large part of hospital networks as well as dental clinic networks. It works with protecting medical records, what is known as protected health information, or PHI. It's split into 2 rules, privacy rule and security rule. Privacy rule deals with the protection of the patient's information, the privacy of their information, so how to keep it confidential, how it's physically accessed. And the security rule, which is what we dealt with the most, is the technical standards, the administrative standards, and the physical standards for it. So an example of this would be that you must have encryption at rest on all drives containing PHI on the network. And so before I move on, I do want to ask you all a quick question. How many of you have been to a hospital or a doctor in the past 5 years? Alright, so that's a pretty substantial number, but that just kind of goes to show you why HIPAA is here and who it all protects, and it affects every single one of us. And that's also why the penalties for violating HIPAA are so steep. They can be up to $1.5 million per violation or per record that is stolen from the network. So, without further ado, I will toss it off to Tanner, and he will talk to you about our server infrastructure.
Alright, so in our network we have 2 domain controllers. We have one in the HQ at Stark Dental, and we also have a domain controller in the remote site over in Bear Island. These are set up for failover, but we'll go over that a little bit later. So basically some services that we're running on our servers are Active Directory, which is basically the essential management of users, groups, and computers for our domain. The Radius server that we created relies on Active Directory. This allows us to log into all of our network devices remotely and have access to all that, as well as domain logins. That also relies on Active Directory, so you can log into workstations throughout our domain, as well as set GPOs, which are group policy objects. It's basically a way to set permissions to a group of users. Instead of having to set permissions to each individual user, you can group them up and then push these permissions to these groups instead of the individual users. An example of this is our file shares that we set up. So we have file shares set for the dentist and for the server team. And we have permissions set up in such a way that the server team can see all of our file shares, have full access to manage them, but our dentists cannot see our server file share. It's basically segments it off so that only people that, you can basically only see what you need to see, and then you only have access to what you need to have access to. Another service that we're running is DNS. This is basically a phone book for our domain. It ties host names to their IP addresses and vice versa. Our NetScaler runs in conjunction with this for our global server load balancing. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. And then our certificate authority is one more service that we're running. It's basically a digital entity that signs a certificate, which is like a key to the network. So it's basically our server is handing a key to our network devices that allows them to access the hidden or more lockdown parts in our network. Which is two-factor authentication heavily relies on that client certificate that gets installed on our workstations. So one more service that we're running is AppLocker. I have a demonstration for this. It's basically a service that you can use to block certain applications and push these permissions to the applications through group policy. So I'll show you here. We have a proof of concept for blocking a Microsoft product, which is Microsoft Paint, and then a third-party application, Mozilla Firefox as well. Let's bring this up here. All right, so this is just on our headquarters domain controller here. Close out of that. And I'll bring up our AppLocker GPO that we have set. So there's a few different ways you can use AppLocker. You can block it based off of the executable rule, which is what we did. There's also a few other methods you can do. This is the easiest to configure. So basically you can see here that we have everyone is being denied access to the Mozilla Firefox folder. So instead of blocking just the exe, you can block everything within the folder as well. As well as Microsoft Paint down here, you can see we're blocking the exe, denying everyone again. So if we go over to Firefox here and try to open it up, it'll say this has been blocked by your admin. And the same with Microsoft Paint. This is really useful if there's any applications that pose a security threat to your network. You're going to want to lock this down for everyone. Or if there's applications that only certain people need it to be able to use, you can lock it down to just those people having access to these applications. So I'd like to pass it off now on to Sam. He's going to talk a little bit about our network security.
All right, so when you are implementing a network, security needs to be at the forefront of your mind. I wish I could go into great depth about these 4 protocols that are sitting up at the top there, but the main takeaway I want you to have is that these are our 4 gateways to our network. In order to get into our network and access to our network, you need to go through these protocols. So, DHCP snooping and ARP inspection work hand in hand to stop anybody from putting a rogue device on the network or passing out rogue addresses and collecting information on it. An ACL, otherwise known as an access control list, is basically a named list of if you can get into the network or not and where you can go on the network. And then storm control stops any sort of denial of service attack. I'm sure you've heard of that. They're becoming a bigger trend nowadays. But our main security feature on the network and our backbone of our security is our Palo Alto firewall. So our Palo Alto firewall can be configured as a zone-based firewall. You can configure traditional policies on it, but what sets it apart from other firewalls is the fact that it is a next-generation firewall. And the fact that it is a next-generation firewall, it can block web applications using application IDs or specific URLs that fall into categories. Now these categories and URLs are updated by Palo Alto whenever you update the code. And so we today have provided a demo for you of blocking Google Drive. Now, why you would want to block Google Drive on the network? So let's say you are in a hospital and you're working with a doctor, but in order to be HIPAA compliant, you have to set up standards as to how you transmit data. So let's say a doctor just randomly wants to put a patient's data up on Google Drive and go from there and see how he can transmit and like how he can work with the other doctor on it. But that is illegal because if any sort of leak happens in that information, your hospital is responsible for that information getting out and that information being out in the public. So, as you can see, I went to Google Drive, typed in the address, and this is the information that shows up to us.